We all like to think that we would know what to do in a moment of crisis. I know I would. Whenever I go into a crowded building, I often look for the nearest exits, and I'd like to think that in a worst-case scenario, I'd be able to help my loved ones and others get to safety. Whenever I walk down a dark street, I'd like to think that if I were to be approached by someone with dark intentions, I'd be able to fight or flee to safety. I'm sure most of us have similar thoughts. But for all of our pondering, it's not often that these thought exercises get put to the test. Yet, in the late summer of 1995, one individual would enter a situation he neither could have expected nor prepared for when he witnessed the abduction of a woman from afar and was unable to help her in any way. This is the story of Heather Teague. On the day that Heather Teague vanished, there were eyes everywhere. It was August 26th of 1995, and Heather was supposed to go camping. She loved nature and had gotten an early start that day, heading to a friend's home at about 4:30 a.m. But her friend was not home, so Heather decided to check back in with them later on. At around 10 a.m., Heather made her way to a local bar that had a payphone and gave her friend a call. This friend's name has never officially been made public, but she confirmed that they were still going to try and go camping, and then her friend invited her over for breakfast. She declined, saying she wanted to go take a dip in the river, then get some sun. Her friend told her to keep her clothes on. Heather then told her friend that she was getting some strange looks at the bar. She wrapped up their conversation, and the two agreed to meet at the beach at noon. His friend never went out to meet her, and at around 12:30 he received a phone call from a different friend. This friend would then go out with the other instead of Heather that day, and had no idea that the brief phone conversation would be the last time that he would ever speak to Heather. When Heather parked her car along a gravel road in the woods near Newbergh Beach, she was being videotaped. The beach was a popular local spot along the Ohio River in Henderson County, Kentucky, and had recently become a little too popular. People were driving off-road vehicles through some nearby farmers' fields, tearing up the land, and an increasing amount of drug paraphernalia was being found in the woods and fields. So, local farmers had banded together to hire someone to survey the beach. This individual videotaped the areas that people usually parked at, making notes of nearby cars and then setting his camera down. But when he put the camera on his dash, he left it recording by mistake. The camera documented Heather arriving at the beach, parking her red Nissan, and then walking into the woods. The camera also documented a red and white Ford Bronco arriving shortly afterward. The Bronco had a custom safari rack, making it a rather distinctive vehicle. When Heather walked into the woods, she was aiming to find a secluded spot to sunbathe. Heather loved the sun and being outdoors. Her family said that she would go hiking and exploring quite a bit, and she often enjoyed solitude. Newbergh Beach was a crowded place sometimes, with reports differing on how many people were there that day. Some say up to 500, but other locals disagree with this, saying that the beach was seldom that crowded. Either way, Heather wanted her own spot on the beach to herself. She was what many would consider a striking woman, with waist-length hair and bright green eyes, and no doubt would have had to contend with people bothering her had she gone to the main part of the beach. She hiked through the woods and walked down a steep embankment to find a somewhat isolated spot. She took a dip in the river to cool off, then laid out her towel to relax. Either suspecting her friend was not showing up, or perhaps not caring about his remark on her clothing, Heather undid her swimsuit top as she lay in the sand to get an even tan on her back. Being in such a secluded spot, Heather must have told her friend in detail where she was going, details that perhaps could have been overheard at the bar that she called him from. But whether or not they had followed her from the bar, or whether this was a new pair of eyes that day, someone was watching Heather from the woods. Across the river, in Indiana, there was yet another set of eyes on Heather. Tim Walthall, a local factory owner, lived at a house directly across from Newbergh Beach in Evansville, Indiana. He and his wife had been taking advantage of the sunny day to get some yard work done. When Tim's wife went in to make lunch at around 1 p.m., he sat with his telescope and watched some people playing on three-wheelers across the river. Tim later stated, "These guys on those three-wheelers were doing some really silly stuff. I was watching them do jumps and stuff when I noticed this girl lying on the beach alone." The three-wheelers were getting dangerously close to where Heather was trying to sunbathe. Then, Tim noticed a man hiding in the bushes where the beach met the woods. As the three-wheelers started to drive away, the man emerged from the woods, walking strangely. He would take a few steps at a time, then stop and duck down. Tim would later note the odd way this man held himself, with his arms held out a distance from his body but his hands angled inwards. The man was Caucasian, heavyset, about 6 feet tall, with shaggy hair and a beard. He soon reached Heather and put his arm on her back. He bunched up her hair, holding it in his hands, and whispered to her. The gesture of seeming familiarity had Tim thinking that it must have been someone who knew the girl, as they were just messing around or something. But then, the man and the girl got to their feet, and Tim saw a gun in the man's hand. He started forcing her back to the woods, and Heather turned to look back at the man. Tim later stated, "I can't describe what the look on her face did to me. It made me sick to my stomach. It was a look of sheer terror."
State Police, Dispatcher Davis.
Yes, sir. I just called the Indiana State Police. I live in Newbergh, Indiana. And, I was sitting at the dinner table. We got through eating dinner, and I got a telescope. I live right on the river. And I was scanning the beach over straight across from the beach from the lock and dam. And there was a girl on the left-hand side of the trees down here, and she was sunbathing, and she was laying face down, and she had her top undone, and she was just bathing. And I was looking back and forth across the beach. I told Karen, I said, I just listened to her. I said, I just looked at the beach. And about this time, a guy come running out of the trees on the left-hand side, and he ran down and grabbed her by the back of the head of the hair and jerked her up. And she grabbed the towel, and he walked her up into the trees, up in the riverbank over here. And I've been watching now for 25 minutes, and I ain't seen her come back. And all of her stuff still sitting down there on the beach.
Where's she at on the beach, sir?
She was, where the new lock dam is?
The Newbergh lock and dam? Yes, sir.
Right straight on that big long beach, and she's almost at the end of the lock wall on your side, on the Kentucky side.
End of the lock wall?
Well, I'm at the end of the lock wall. I'm right straight across on the Indiana side where the new lock wall ends. And she was right there at that end. Now, I swear this guy looked like he had a gun. He come down, he had a chrome-plated, I could see it glistening in the sun, and it looked like a revolver, and he snuck up behind her, and she was laying face down on the mat. And she had long hair, and he grabbed her by the head of the hair and raised her head up and showed her the gun, and then when she did, she stood up, and she grabbed the towel that was laying there, and she put it on top of her, and he marched her in front of him right up to the top of the trees.
What did she look like?
She was, I only had like a 25 on the scope, so she was Caucasian, and she had long, kind of brownish black hair.
You mean long to her shoulder, to her waist, or what?
The middle of her back, probably.
What color was her bathing suit?
She didn't have a top on, but she had a bikini bottoms on. It was kind of like a multicolored, flower color. There's a lounge chair.
Okay, hold on, please. Okay, she had on a multicolored flowered bottom bikini.
Yeah. And all her stuff's still here. It's been 20 minutes ago, and she ain't come back yet. He marched her up in the trees, and there were, at the time it happened, there was only one other group of people on the beach, and they were down the far right-hand end.
What did he look like?
He was kind of heavy set. He just had like a blue jean cut-off pants on and tennis shoes, and I couldn't tell if he had a full beard or if he just had real shaggy hair or something over his face. But you couldn't.
What color is his hair, sir?
Kind of dark brown.
Was he white or black?
He was white.
White male?
Yeah.
And he had a gun with him?
Yes, sir.
Did he have a shirt on?
Nope, no shirt. He had what appeared to be like, it was a chrome plating because it kept glistening in the sun, you know what I mean?
What's her stuff look like laying there on the beach?
She's got a lounge chair laying there, blue and white lounge chair, and her purse and stuff was laying to the left-hand side of it, and she picked her towel with her when she left because she had it in front of her hiding her breast when she walked up the beach.
What did her towel look like?
God, I don't know, a towel. Towel was kind of
light color, dark color?
Kind of pinkish color, I think.
And where did he take her to?
There was some trees on the left-hand side, right up from where she was sunbathing. She was down this far end. He just walked right up in the trees, and they disappeared, and I couldn't see them.
And her stuff was laying on the beach next to the end of the wall?
No. I'm at the end of the wall on the Indiana side. She's all the way across on your Kentucky side, just about where the end of the lock wall comes out, though.
Okay, the wall doesn't come out over on the other side of Kentucky?
No, it comes out on the Indiana side.
Well, I'm not familiar with the dam. I don't know.
Okay. No,
I've never been there.
on the Indiana side.
What's your name?
Tim. And the last name's Walthall, W-A-L-T-H-A-L-L.
W-A-L what?
T-H-A-L-L.
Your phone number?
It's 853-9984, 812 area code.
And this is right across the beach from the dam?
Yeah, there's a beach on your side, on the Kentucky side.
Yeah.
Straight across from where the dam is, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big party beach. Everybody goes over there all the time. And she was kind of down to the far end of it towards the dam end.
Yeah.
And she was in pretty close to where some trees come out on the end of the sand, or where the beach where the trees run out here, and she was just off to the right of that. And he would come out of the trees is where he came out of, and walked over there and ran over there actually, and she was laying face down, sunbathing, with her belly down. And he snuck up behind her and grabbed her by the head of the hair and raised her head up and looked at me like he shouldered a gun. That's when I saw the gun glistening. Mm-hmm. And then she jumped up. When she did, she grabbed her towel and put it in front of her. And then he walked with his hands straight out in front of her and had her by the head of the hair in front of him. And he was walking. You could see the gun glistening in the sunlight. Mm-hmm. And he walked her straight to the trees.
And that's on the beach right across the river from the dam?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. We'll have someone check it.
I mean, I appreciate it. I mean, maybe it's nothing, but goddamn it scared the shit out of me.
All right, sir. We'll have someone check it.
All right.
Thank you.
After this phone call, the local police department sent nearby officer Mike Klein to investigate. Tim stayed outside, waiting anxiously, and from across the river directed Klein to the spot that Heather had been taken from. Tim watched Mike Klein disappear into the woods, then heard, "I got something," before Klein hung up. Officer Klein had found the bottom of Heather's bathing suit in the nearby woods. About half an hour later, Detective David Osborne joined the search, and the officers then called Tim back. Tim took his boat across the river to speak to them in person. The search for Heather was underway. The video taken to document the crop damage would later be turned over to law enforcement. Shortly after the time of Heather's disappearance, the video showed a clean-shaven man with close-cropped hair sitting in the driver's seat of the Ford Bronco, while another man rifled through Heather's car. The footage was grainy and no discernible details of the other man could be made out. The unique Ford Bronco left soon after Heather vanished, so it was immediately flagged as suspicious. Meanwhile, back at Newbergh Beach, police soon had the area roped off. Tracking dogs did pick up Heather's scent, but it stopped just as the woods began. This indicated that her abductor may have picked her up to carry her. Teague's car was taken in as evidence, along with the clothes that she left on the beach and her swimsuit top and towel that were found at the edge of the woods. Just a few hours after the abduction, at around 3 p.m., local woman Michelle Morgan saw something strange. Morgan had been driving on Kentucky Highway 811 when a car pulled in behind her on the road. The car followed her for a time, and looking back, Morgan saw that the driver was struggling with a young woman in the car. Morgan later said that she was 99% certain that the girl was Heather, and that it was clear she did not want to be in the car. Morgan said she'd immediately felt guilty when she lost the car, and did not try to follow it to see what was going on. The man who had been spotted in the car had long hair and a shaggy beard, matching Tim's description. The man and the girl had been struggling in a red car as well, but it was a Chevette, not the Bronco that fled the scene. Days later, when Morgan became aware of the abduction and spoke with the police, they created two composite sketches of the suspect. One that was a headshot based on Morgan's description, and one that was a full-body drawing based on Tim Walthall's. The first few days of the search for Heather Teague were a mix of cooperation and confusion between law enforcement, the public, and the media. Henderson County Police pulled out all the stops to search the woods where Heather had vanished, searching dozens of square miles with people, dogs, and helicopters. The media was on the case, printing Heather's picture and pleading for information, but also scandalized by the witness account having been viewed through a telescope. Tim Walthall and his family even had to briefly leave town, as the media was implying that he'd only been looking through his telescope for nefarious reasons. Police took several days to release the drawings of the suspect because they wanted to get a variety of witness accounts, as they thought that surely someone else had seen something. In an interview with the Associated Press on August 30th, Kentucky State Police Trooper Larry Abel made a plea to the public to come forward with information. He stated, "There were 500 to 600 people there that afternoon and no one saw anything. We find that hard to believe." A week later, local citizen Suzanne Dennis Miles wrote to the Messenger-Inquirer to contradict this. She said that she was on the beach the day Heather was taken, and that there were only around 50 people there, nowhere close to the 500 initially reported. In the same report, she says that she goes to the beach frequently, and that there are only ever hundreds of people there if there is some local event happening. That day there wasn't. The media would eventually stop making vague accusations at Tim, and the initial friction between everyone seemed to die down. Tim Walthall and his family promptly returned to town to help with the search. Police started bringing in volunteers to help look, letting the local citizens assist. And when police finally came out with the drawings of the suspect, the media played their part in showing them constantly. The media covered this story often in the early days, telling the world more about who Heather Teague was. They printed all of the things that normally tug at the public's heartstrings, that Heather had been both a cheerleader and a salutatorian, that she had excelled at sports in high school and been a beauty queen as she'd grown up, winning homecoming queen one year and placing in a local pageant in 1989. She was smart. She went to college with the help of scholarships that she had earned and studied pre-med before switching to chemistry with a minor in biology. Heather wasn't perfect, of course. She was habitually late to things, and would always have a story about why she was, a quality that both annoyed and endeared her to those around her. Heather had a unique sense of style. She thrifted all of her clothes and loved to wear combat boots with any outfit. The day she'd vanished, police had found 2 rocks in the pocket of her jeans. She had never grown too old to collect rocks that she thought were lovely. However, it would be months, years, and in some cases even decades before the media would speak on the other aspects of Heather's life. The ones that did not fit neatly into the news snippets about a girl with both brains and beauty. Heather had been struggling quite a bit in her life leading up to her disappearance, and she was not the straight-edge, clean-cut woman that the media portrayed her as. Though her 4th and final year of school was fully funded by her scholarships, Heather became somewhat depressed and disillusioned and dropped out before she started her final year. She moved back home and worked 2 jobs, but seemed to enjoy them both, taking pride in her work. And for a time, she seemed happy. But according to her mother, she started to get involved in unsavory things shortly after she moved back home. Her mother, Sarah, claimed that Heather had started doing drugs and that her boyfriend, Ricky Bankin, had gotten her into them. The claims that he got her into drugs were dubious. In the FBI disclosure, the only mention her friends made of drugs was that she would occasionally take a puff off of a joint in a social setting. Heather's mother, Sarah, was not a fan of Ricky though, and was convinced that he was dragging Heather down. There was also the unsavory fact that Ricky was nearly 20 years older than Heather, who was just 23 years old at the time she vanished. Heather had been troubled leading up to her disappearance. An interview with one of her friends showed that when asked by police whether they thought Heather might have killed herself, the response read simply 50-50. Heather was a writer and a poet, and some of her writings had taken a dark turn, verging on suicidal ideation. There was enough evidence pointing to Heather's suicidal tendencies that police later said that had Tim Walthall not been looking through his telescope that day, Heather's disappearance might have been written off as a suicide. 2 weeks before Heather vanished, her family actually reported her missing. But police had quickly found her, and being that she was a grown woman, she told them that she was not missing, she was just running around. Just 2 days before she vanished, Heather was fired from her job. After that, she stormed out of the house. She did make one final phone call to her mother before that fateful Saturday though, and told her about a dream she'd had that had involved something about a dirt road, a fact that later made Sarah question if her daughter had made some kind of premonition. Now, we're going to pause for just a moment to hear a word from today's sponsors. In the early days of the search, whoever owned the red and white Ford Bronco failed to come forward. However, numerous people throughout the town recognized the car and knew it belonged to a man with long hair and a bushy beard. Around half a dozen people called the police to report that the suspect was almost certainly one Marvin Ray Dill. Marvin Ray Dill was out on shock probation that summer. Shock probation is when offenders bound for probation must first serve a short time in jail in the hopes that it will deter them from wanting to reoffend, or get taken off probation for any reason. Dill had served only 40 days starting back in April for marijuana charges. This deterrent seemed to work very well for Dill. Police showed up on August 30th to speak with Tracy Dill, Marvin's wife. After the police were done talking to her, she asked Marvin if he had been at Newbergh Beach that day. This sparked a fight that culminated in Marvin telling Tracy to take their son and get out of the house. He told her that if the police came for him, he was going to kill himself because he wasn't going back to jail. Tracy went to stay with a neighbor, and the next day the neighbor and Tracy went to the police. They told authorities that they were worried about Marvin's safety with his threats of suicide. Marvin would not answer the door or the phone. Years later, Marvin's uncle, a man named Ernest Green, would give his account of what transpired that day to police. This took place in 2006 and was the first time that Ernest was ever interviewed about this case in detail, which he remarked at the start of the interview was something he found very strange. Ernest and a man who chose to remain anonymous went to try and calm Marvin down late on the 31st. Ernest was a former police officer and felt he had a chance of helping the situation. The two men drove to Marvin's trailer, a secluded space sitting on nearly 30 acres of woods, but they couldn't get in and Dill would not answer the door. They then went looking for Marvin's wife, Tracy. As they departed the property, they ran into a state trooper watching the residence and asked him if he had a warrant. He said that he didn't, so they told him to leave. They were worried that if Dill saw him, he might go through with his threat of suicide. They found Tracy at a neighbor's house and she gave them a key. When they walked into the Dill residence, the house was dark. They split up and found Marvin in the master bedroom closet holding a gun to his head. They started talking to him, reminding him of good memories, and trying to coax him out of the closet so they could try and grab the gun. They did not ask him why he was so afraid that police were after him, and Ernest tried telling him happy stories from his childhood. Then the phone rang, and Marvin became inconsolable. One of the men answered the phone, and it was the police saying they were outside, and demanding that the three men come out to meet them. The third man, who chose to remain unnamed, went outside to explain the situation, and to avoid witnessing Marvin's suicide if he did decide to go through with it. Marvin then left the closet and walked into the room, and Ernest thought about going for the gun. He started coming closer to Marvin with a flashlight, but Dill told him to stop. He asked him not to shine the light in his eyes. Ernest sat back on the bed, and then both men heard a noise under the house. Dill said it must be the police. Though his uncle tried to reason with him, Dill walked further into the bathroom as if concerned about the mess, or perhaps to keep Ernest from having to witness what he was about to do. Then he shot himself. When police got inside the house, they found Marvin Dill still alive, but he succumbed to his wounds about an hour later in the hospital. After his suicide, they found a note And when the lights were turned on, those in the house found that Marvin had spread out his family photos on the bed. After Marvin killed himself, the friend who had been with him told police, "The Bronco is back there somewhere," pointing them toward the oil fields at the end of the property. Police investigating the disappearance of Heather Teague were confident that Marvin Ray Dill was their man, and brought in the FBI to examine his truck and began searching his property with dogs. The vast expanse of woods also held 2 small ponds. Eventually, an anonymous witness would come forward to tell police that on the day Heather vanished, in the early evening, they heard the sounds of a woman screaming in pain from the Dill house. When the news broke that the man matching the description of Heather Teague's kidnapper had killed himself, the police and the media were ready to paint him guilty. Law enforcement was immediately questioned by the media about the rather light sentence Dill had been given for the drug charges earlier that year. Circuit Judge Steve Hayden defended Marvin Dill's sentence by saying, "Nobody has a crystal ball. Who would have thought a guy with 13 marijuana plants would do something like this?" Dill's only previous conviction was for harassment in 1993, a charge with a broad range of offenses, but when looked into more closely paints a picture of a man who could, without a doubt, readily hurt a woman. Apparently the previous year, 1992, Marvin Dill had taken an interest in a local woman whose boyfriend had recently passed away. He would call her to tease her and ask if her boyfriend would come to the phone, then laugh when she got upset. This escalated to following her around as she went about her day, then calling her later to tell her about what she had been up to, letting her know that he was following her. He then started to tell her that he could sexually assault her if he wanted to. Police eventually put a stop to this, but the charges were known when Dill was given his relatively light sentence for marijuana. A more in-depth look at Marvin Dill's court records showed an even more disturbing picture of his criminal activity. The reason that police had searched him and his vehicle for drugs and found the marijuana that led to his arrest back in April was because he had been driving around in his car and propositioning young girls for sex. In addition to the drugs, police found duct tape, rubber gloves, rope, and 2 loaded handguns in his car as he was trying to lure girls inside. Marvin Ray Dill's behavior was not unknown to those closest to him. Friends and family were among those who reported him to the police as matching the description of Heather Teague's kidnapper, and Dill's wife even consulted a local attorney about her suspicions that her husband was the person responsible. During the first month of the search, in addition to the dogs, there were volunteers on horseback, and even a psychic was brought in. Searchers looked all along the river at points accessible by off-road vehicles, as well as around Marvin Dill's property. Tim Walthall started working closely with Heather's mother Sarah to help her brainstorm other areas they could search, fully investing himself into helping find the girl he had seen taken. He donated both considerable time and money to try and keep the search alive. As the search wore on, the disturbing question was looming about whether or not the man who had taken Heather had actually been Marvin Ray Dill, as no definitive proof had been found. In late October of 1995, the media got wind that Dill did not quite match the police sketch at the time of Heather's abduction. While witnesses were correct that Dill normally spotted shaggy hair and a beard, he had shaved his head and his beard several months before Heather was kidnapped. During the initial autopsy, and when police brought Tim in to look at Dill's body, they thought perhaps that Dill had cut his hair to disguise himself. But eventually they connected the dots that Dill had had his head and beard shaved shortly before he got out of jail just months prior. He could not have been the man who had taken Heather if Tim Walthall and Michelle Morgan's accounts were correct. In a letter to the McLean County News, Heather's mother Sarah reminded the public about the sighting of a woman struggling in a Chevette. She also said that she had heard an account that a Chevette had closely been following a red Bronco when it left the beach that day. Apparently 2 girls had approached Sarah on September 7th as she was canvassing the beach and told her that they saw a red Chevette following the Bronco, but these 2 girls did not give Sarah their contact information and never went to the police. On November 2nd of 1995, Sarah wrote a letter to McLean County News begging the public for information. She put in her own personal phone number and asked anyone who might know anything to call her. She speculated on whether or not Heather was alive or dead. and if she was alive, what might have been done to her. Sarah said that, "Nothing shines without her anymore. Sunny days are cold and dreary without her presence near." Sarah spoke of Heather's love of nature and how she loved sunny summer days best of all. Perhaps it was a small mercy that she got to lay out in the sun for a bit on what may have been her last day alive. Later that week, on November 7th, Kentucky authorities held a grand jury inquiry to try and determine if Marvin Ray Dill had been responsible. No new information was brought to light. His wife, Tracy, was questioned before a judge, but invoked her Fifth Amendment right to keep silent. The case fell out of the media until the spring of 1996, but it only resurfaced because Heather Teague's mother, Sarah, had found herself in some legal trouble of her own. Heather's former boyfriend, Ricky Bankin, filed charges of harassment, mail theft, and forgery against Sarah. The mail theft and forgery were from an incident before Heather vanished, where Sarah claims Ricky told her to sign one of his unemployment checks while he was out of town to pay for a repair at his house. The harassment charges, however, were because Sarah had apparently been calling Ricky and telling him that he matched the description of a possible suspect. Ricky wasn't the only one being accused. Sarah had been writing letters to Tracy Dill, Marvin's widow, looking for answers. When April of 1996 hit, Sarah decided that she was going to write Tracy Dill one letter every day demanding answers about Heather's disappearance, until Heather's birthday on the 25th. After several weeks of this, Tracy got the police to intervene and filed harassment charges. The forgery and theft charges were dropped due to a lack of evidence before the trial. On July 18, 1996, Sarah went to trial for the harassment charges. To satisfy Sarah's curiosity, County Attorney Robert Wiederstein asked Tracy the most pertinent questions from the letter. He asked if she ever helped clean up the Ford Bronco, if she knew where Heather was, if she disposed of Heather's bathing suit, or if she knew if Heather had been sold into sexual slavery. Most disturbing of all, he asked her about alleged reports that neighbors had heard a woman screaming from Marvin Dill's house on the afternoon of Heather's abduction. To all of these questions, under oath, Tracy simply replied, "No, sir." The charges against Sarah were dropped after a short deliberation from the jury. Sarah then promptly told the media that she intended to try and press charges against Tracy for withholding information. Behind the scenes, police were still attempting to make headway in the investigation. The Ford Bronco had been thoroughly cleaned before the police were able to process it, but they managed to find 2 small specks of blood as well as a towel in the front seat that may have belonged to Heather. The DNA testing showed that these specks of blood were from 2 different people. One patch was ruled out as a match, and the other was too small to get a proper sample size to test. Near the end of 1996, numerous rumors about what happened to Heather were being spread. One said that she had started a new life in Indiana, and another said that she was being held prisoner in a cave. Henderson County Police investigated both of these leads as best as they could. Lieutenant David Osborne pleaded with the public to come forward if they knew anything. He said that he thinks that someone knows something, and that sooner or later they'll have to let something slip. Since Osborne had been among the first to arrive at the crime scene, he was taking Heather's case personally, and never turned down a chance to speak with the media to try and get answers. Meanwhile, Heather's mother, Sarah, continued to try and take matters into her own hands. In March of 1997, Sarah told the media that she was writing letters to her local governor. She told the Associated Press, "What I'm fighting is the Constitution, our Fifth Amendment. Our founding fathers would be outraged if they knew that their document was keeping a mother from knowing about her child." The Freedom of Information Act request that would be publicly released years later about the case revealed that Sarah had called the FBI at one point in the early years of the case to accuse them of destroying evidence and covering something up. In an interior email that looks to have been between media coordinators at the FBI and the TV show Without a Trace, the FBI email calls Sarah a remarkable woman who has kept her daughter's case alive. This was a pattern that would repeat itself all throughout the search for Heather Teague. Her mother Sarah was tenacious, accusatory, and at times perhaps a bit unstable in her search for a daughter, but even those that she pointed the finger at seemed to hold some deep compassion for her struggle as well as her determination to find her daughter. Ernest Green even received a letter from Sarah at one point accusing him of possibly killing Marvin, but he had since lost the letter. In his interview with the FBI years later, he said he had nothing but respect for Sarah and understood that she was dealing with some serious grief. As the years ticked by, Sarah continued to follow up on tips that she received. In 1998, Sarah started a petition to have Heather's case heard by a grand jury in the hopes that it might bring some new information forward, or pressure Marvin Dill's wife Tracy to finally say what she knew. Sarah got 2,000 signatures. Investigator David Osborne spoke with the grand jury, but no new information came forward and no new developments came out of the petition. Tracy Dill was not brought in to speak. That same year, police received a tip that 2 hunters near the Dill family home witnessed someone throwing rags from the car, apparently cleaning it intensely. But if Tracy knew anything about this, she was keeping quiet. In a letter written on January 26th of 1999 titled "Pray for Heather," Sarah made some interesting comments about the case. In this letter, she cryptically says, "Why did the big man with sandy blonde hair that swore revenge on me 3 weeks before the abduction shave his beard and cut his hair?" She does not elaborate on this, but the timeline would not fit with when Dill cut his hair. She also made vague references to a plan that may have gone wrong the day that Heather vanished, that involved someone who was supposed to meet her on the beach that day. Though she spoke with the media quite a bit, there are many things that Sarah alluded to throughout the search that she has never elaborated on. To read between the lines a bit, Ricky Bankin, Heather's ex-boyfriend, had blonde hair and may have been the friend that Heather called the morning she vanished. Sarah has never trusted him. That summer, on the 4th anniversary of Heather's abduction, Sarah organized a reenactment of her daughter's kidnapping. Heather's aunt, Terry Bruce, played Heather, and local man Bill Lassefield played the abductor. Sarah took the place of Tim, watching from the same vantage point across the river, hoping to realize something police may have missed. She also wanted to see how clearly she could see the abductor, as there had been discussion about whether or not the suspect really had a beard, or if perhaps his face had been obscured by mosquito netting or something like that. New evidence found near the end of the year in 1999 briefly brought police hope that they might have answers soon. On Christmas Day, police told Sarah that they had found a pair of black combat boots washed up on the beach. They were very much like the kind Heather would wear and had concrete stuck to the bottoms. Police searched once again, but found nothing. We're gonna pause once more, but we will return in just a moment. At the turn of the century, as numerous years had passed, those who were still looking for Heather Teague fell into yearly rituals around her disappearance. Her mother Sarah has been placing lavender ribbons on various memorials and near spots where she puts up missing persons posters. Tim Walthall set up a cross on Newbergh Beach in Heather's memory. Sarah visits it every year. The media would check in not only with Sarah, but often with David Osborne as the anniversary loomed every summer. In 2001, Sarah told the Owensboro Messenger that she will not cut her hair until her daughter Heather is found. David Osborne had retired from the police force by then, but as a father to 2 daughters, he said he still thought about the case and checks in on it from time to time. Osborne still maintains that someone knows something and told the Messenger, "If anyone who does know what happened to Heather has a shred of decency, they will tell us. Police have spent a tremendous amount of time on this, but that's nothing compared to what the family has went through." Osborne stressed to the media that they followed up on everything. He wanted people to call if they even suspected anything, and that their call would be taken seriously no matter what they said. On September 2nd of 2001, Sarah took out a paid advertisement that ran in the Owensboro Messenger. The advertisement was dense with speculation and theories, as well as vague accusations. Sarah claims that there were 2 state policemen on the beach that the day Heather vanished. She questioned why the suspect sketch looked almost identical to Marvin Ray Dill's license photo, when that was not what he looked like at the time. Sarah alludes to being given either psychic or divine predictions before Heather's abduction that Heather was going to be abducted. The letter points to the possibility of poor mental health, but also provided insight into why Sarah may be so emotional. People were calling her and making up disturbing or disgusting detailed accounts of how Heather was killed. People were showing her snuff films and pictures of girls who resembled Heather being killed. While the letter is certainly questionable in its accusations, it provides a glimpse into the stress and trauma that Sarah has dealt with in losing her daughter, and why she is so desperate for answers. A year later, September 5th of 2002, the Owensboro Messenger published another of Sarah's letters. This one asked for donations to keep a billboard up about Heather, and asked for answers as well. The letter concluded by questioning why the police officers on the beach that hot summer day did not hear Heather's screams. Two years later, in 2004, a new suspect entered the spotlight. A truck driver named Christopher John Bello was serving time for murdering his girlfriend, Catherine Fetzer, in 1991. He had only been arrested in 2003, and as police uncovered more about him, they discovered a possible link to Heather Teague. Bello had lived in Henderson, Kentucky, but left 3 days after Heather vanished, just before Marvin Ray Dill's suicide. Heather Teague had a striking physical resemblance to Bello's girlfriend, and police at the time suspected Bello had killed multiple women, so if he was a serial killer, Heather was his type. Bello spent a lot of time at Newbergh Beach, and he, Heather, and Marvin Dill all frequented the same local bar. The same bar in which Heather had made the phone call that announced her plan to go to the beach on the day she vanished. The same bar where she had told her friend that she had been getting some strange looks. Heather, Dill, and Bello even had friends in common. Bello often went to Newbergh Beach to do drugs, and his sister even confirmed that his favorite spot on the river was right near the secluded spot on the beach where Heather had been sunbathing. Perhaps most damning of all, Christopher Bello matched Tim Walthall's description exactly. His hair was long and his beard was unkempt, and he had a strange way of standing, with his arms held out and his hands angled in. A side-by-side comparison of Tim's police sketch captured the same odd stance that Bello has exactly. With this new information, Heather's mother, Sarah, told the media that she was not convinced that Marvin Ray Dill was innocent, and may very well be involved, but she did not think he acted alone. A detective with Evansville police went up to question Bello, and while he would not admit to anything involving Heather, he strangely never denied anything either. Yet, without a confession or any concrete evidence, the lead seems to have gone nowhere. On August 26, 2005, Governor Ernie Fletcher declared August 26th to be the Heather Teague Day of Prayer in Kentucky. Heather had been missing for 10 years at that point. Yet sadly, that same day, Heather's cousin Sue Ann Ray Jenkins was murdered by her husband. The 26th of August became a day for the family to mourn not just one, but two family members. The next year, Heather's family joined numerous other families of missing people on the 2006 Road to Remember tour, a nationwide tour with stops in numerous cities to bring attention to the people local to the area that they had vanished. The tour was started in 2004 in honor of Leah Roberts, who had gone missing on a cross-country road trip, and whose story I will be covering in an upcoming episode. In 2006, Heather's sister, Vicky, reminisced about Heather to those who had come to hear the family speak. She recalled fondly those little things like arguing about borrowing clothes or taking too long in the shower. She told the crowd about Heather's affinity for nature and her habit of exploring isolated places. She said that Heather was an optimist who saw the best in people. By the mid-2000s, Sarah had stopped going to the beach every year, and instead would have a quiet memorial dinner for Heather on August 26th. In 2007, Sarah made the difficult decision to have Heather declared legally dead so the case could be closed and she could have access to records she couldn't previously view. Kentucky State Police had been denying her records request for years, even for requests as limited as being able to listen to Tim Walthall's 911 call. After media attention was brought in, police eventually relented and let Sarah listen to the calls sometime the next year. In March of 2008, the DNA from the Ford Bronco was tested again. Police confirmed that a hair found on a towel in the car did belong to Heather Teague. In December of 2008, Penny Ball, the leader of a bloodhound tracking organization, brought in her bloodhound to search Newbergh Beach. Penny told the media that she believed dogs could certainly pick up a scent 13 years later, but articles about the search were skeptical. The pair searched for 2 days, and Sarah spoke to Joshua Dill, Marvin's son, to try and get permission to search the Dill family property. She told him that she no longer believed that Marvin killed Heather, and that this was Joshua's chance to prove his father innocent. Yet Joshua did not approve the search. Apparently, the bloodhound had numerous hits as they neared the Dill family property line, so Sarah started petitioning for a search warrant. This request was denied, even in light of the new DNA evidence. Years passed, and Sarah continued to follow up on leads. Heather's old bedroom stayed preserved, but posters and articles about Heather's disappearance kept Heather's old possessions company as leads developed. The case would stall until 2011, when the Freedom of Information Act request was released. 2 years later, in early 2013, Sarah announced that she was going to file a lawsuit against the Kentucky State Police Department. She claimed that they botched the investigation so badly that what truly happened on the day of Heather's abduction may never be known. Sarah found everything about the case suspicious. In her letter to Ernest Green, she made it clear that she seemed to think that being a former police officer meant he might have conspired with law enforcement to cover something up. Sarah said that Tim was brought in to identify Marvin after his suicide, and claimed that the back of his head had been destroyed by the bullet's exit wound. Sarah claims the autopsy contradicts this and showed there was no exit wound, hinting further at some kind of cover-up. However, she was also pointing the finger at Tim Walthall, the man who witnessed Heather's abduction. She claimed Tim changed his story, and she found him suspicious. Sarah also thought it was extremely suspicious that the FOIA disclosure said that Heather was last seen on a boat ramp at around 3 p.m., which differs from the accepted public account. However, when reading through the disclosure, there was only one form that made this claim, and it looked to be a brief case summary filled out in haste to send to another department. The report also said authorities considered drugs, public corruption, or prostitution in connection with Heather's death. They did look into all of those angles, but they looked into any and all tips that came in. They worked with a psychic at one point and followed up on a lead that Heather was moonlighting as a stripper, but quickly dismissed it when none of the local dancers in the area recognized her. Police looked into every lead, no matter how far-fetched. Sarah's lawsuit was dismissed in June. She told the media then, "The next time that I file suit, it won't be malfeasance, it will be malicious neglect. They have conspired to hide things from me. I have got hard evidence that shows there is something that was going on that day that is being covered up." Kentucky State Police never commented to the media about the lawsuit. They were keeping the search alive though, and seemed to take some of Sarah's frustrations to heart. One of her complaints was that the bodies of water on Marvin Ray Dill's property were never searched. In August of 2014, police launched a series of searches of water retention basins on a farm near Dill's property. They made a public plea for anyone to come forward with information about Heather Teague, and promised to follow up on any leads brought to them. But in late 2016, Sarah was back in court to challenge the Kentucky State Police again. She claimed that she had gone to a police post to listen to the 911 call made by Tim Walthall earlier that year, but the one played for her was a different call than the one that she had heard during her previous request in 2008. Apparently, the phone call heard in 2008 described the man as having mosquito netting over his head, and the dispatcher was a female, while the 2016 call had a male dispatcher and fit Tim's original story about a shirtless, bearded man. When they went to listen to the tape in 2016 and noted discrepancies, the officer told them that the digital copy had been made in 2014. Before then, it was a reel-to-reel copy. But Sarah vividly remembered listening to the call on a computer in 2008, which would not have been possible if the call had not yet been copied into the digital format. Preceding the trial, Sarah speculated to the media that Heather was perhaps working with someone to go into witness protection because of connections she had to the local drug scene. This is heavily implied to be accusing her former boyfriend, Ricky Bankin. Sarah said in a November 8th article in the Owensboro Messenger that this involves drugs, prostitution, and public corruption according to FBI files. We know Heather met with a Henderson police officer the night before she was killed. This claim has not been elaborated on, and is not substantiated anywhere in the FOIA disclosure. That same month, the judge presiding over the case ordered Kentucky State Police to release the chain of custody information about the 911 call. The judge sided with Sarah because police could not provide any concrete reasons as to why the recording's release would jeopardize their investigation. By January of the next year, 2 months later, State Police had still not given Sarah the 911 call records. Police provided the 2016 call, but claimed that there was no record of a 911 call played for the family in 2008. Police later contradicted this and said that they did have a tape of the call played in 2008, but that it had since been lost. They were fined $24,000, the cost of Sarah's legal fees. The fact that their story changed and seems to contradict when the call was digitized is a bit strange. To this day, no evidence to substantiate any of Sarah's conspiratorial claims has ever come to light, but she's been keeping the case alive and speaks with the media every year on the anniversary of the day that Heather was taken. Police are also working to keep the case alive in their way. In late December of 2022, Kentucky State Police announced that they were going to send off several items for DNA testing to see if they could find a new break in the case with how far DNA testing had advanced. They sent off a towel that was suspected to belong to Heather, found in the Ford Bronco, a towel they knew was Heather's, as well as Heather's bathing suit bottoms. They were supposed to send the items in 2014, but did not for unknown reasons. They only sent out the items when Sarah realized the mistake. The results from this round of testing are still pending. The obvious person to test against would be Christopher Bello. However, he was released from prison in November of 2021. So if his DNA is not already on file, which you hope it would be, such a comparison may be difficult to obtain. If the newest tests do not bring any new information to light, there is no doubt that Sarah will continue to keep her daughter Heather's case alive in the media. Though it's been nearly 30 years, Sarah will not stop until she finds answers. But unless the DNA test provides some new evidence, or until someone who knows something decides to speak up, the disappearance of Heather Teague will remain unresolved.